The check for $500,000 sat on the mahogany table between me and my father-in-law, Roland Ashford. The amount was printed in bold black ink. More money than I'd ever seen in one place, more than most people in my small Ohio town would make in a decade. Roland's cold gray eyes never left mine as he pushed the Mont Blanc pen toward me, its gold tip gleaming under the conference room's harsh fluorescent lights. "Sign the divorce papers, take the money, and never contact Vivian or our family again," he said, his voice carrying the same authority he used to close million-dollar deals. "This is a one-time offer, Dean. You have 60 seconds to decide." His wife, Cordelia, sat beside him, her perfectly manicured fingers drumming against her Chanel purse, her expression suggesting she was dealing with something particularly distasteful, like stepping in something unpleasant in her designer heels. To my left, their lawyer, a shark in a three-piece suit named Harrison Blackwood, had already arranged the documents in perfect order. Divorce papers, a non-disclosure agreement, and a non-contact order that would make me a legal stranger to the woman I'd married 3 years ago. 30 seconds, Roland announced, checking his Rolex. What he didn't know, what none of them could have possibly imagined as they sat there in their custom-tailored superiority, was that 12 years later, I'd be sitting across from him at another conference table, this time as the billionaire buying his crumbling empire. The same Roland Ashford, who now treated me like dirt beneath his Italian leather shoes, would be begging me to save his family from bankruptcy. The same Cordelia who couldn't remember my name at family dinners, always calling me David or Dennis instead of Dean, would be pleading with tears in her eyes. And Vivian, my beautiful Vivian who had chosen them over me, who had made the most heartbreaking decision without even telling me, would stand up in that future boardroom and scream the words that would echo through the corporate halls, "The broke husband is now the billionaire buying us." But on this day, in this moment, I was just Dean Holbrook, a 31-year-old veterinarian whose world had collapsed 48 hours ago when I discovered my wife had terminated our pregnancy without telling me, whose in-laws had orchestrated the entire destruction of my marriage like they were conducting a hostile takeover of a rival company. "Time's up," Roland said, his voice cutting through my thoughts. "What's it going to be, Dean? Take the money and start fresh, or leave empty-handed and we'll destroy you in court. My lawyers will make sure you don't even keep that pathetic animal clinic of yours." I looked at the check again. $500,000. To the Ashfords, it was pocket change, a rounding error in their quarterly reports. To me, it was a fortune that could either bury me in shame or become the seed of something they'd never see coming. My hand reached for the pen, trembling not with fear, but with a rage so cold it felt like ice in my veins. "Before I sign," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "I want you to remember this moment, Roland. Remember how small you made me feel. Remember how you bought me off like I was nothing more than an inconvenience in your daughter's life. Remember it all." Roland laughed, a sound like expensive scotch over frozen stones. "Trust me, Dean, after today I won't remember you at all. Men like you are forgotten the moment they leave the room." I signed my name with deliberate strokes, each letter a promise to myself. I signed the divorce papers that would end my marriage to Vivian. I signed the non-disclosure agreement that would silence my story. I signed the non-contact order that would make me a ghost in their lives. And then I picked up the check, folded it once, and placed it in the inside pocket of my off-the-rack suit jacket. "Gentlemen, Mrs. Ashford," I said, standing up and buttoning my jacket, a gesture of dignity they probably didn't think I possessed. "You've made a mistake today, not in ending my marriage, but in teaching me how your world really works. You've shown me that everything has a price, that loyalty can be bought, that love is secondary to wealth. These are lessons I won't forget." "Spare us the dramatic exit, Dean," Cordelia said, already pulling out her phone to probably text her country club friends about the successful removal of their daughter's unfortunate mistake. "Take your money and go back to your little animal hospital. Vivian's already moved on. Sterling moved into the guest house this morning. Sterling Ashford, of course, Vivian's cousin, the Harvard-educated golden boy who'd been circling her like a well-dressed vulture since he returned from business school. The man who belonged in their world in a way I never could. Harrison Blackwood, the lawyer, stood up and handed me a manila envelope. "Everything you need is in there, Mr. Holbrook. The check will clear immediately. The divorce will be finalized in 30 days. And remember, any attempt to contact the family will result in immediate legal action." I took the envelope and walked toward the door, my footsteps echoing on the imported marble floor. Just before I reached the handle, I turned back one more time. The three of them were already gathering their things, already moving on, already forgetting me. Roland was checking his phone, probably monitoring stock prices. Cordelia was reapplying her lipstick. Harrison was packing his briefcase with the efficiency of someone who'd destroyed countless lives with paperwork. "Roland," I said, making him look up one last time, "you're right that men like me are forgotten the moment we leave the room. But sometimes those forgotten men come back as someone entirely different, someone you never saw coming." He waved his hand dismissively. "Security will escort you out, Dean. Your parking validation has been revoked." I walked out of Ashford Industries that day with a broken heart, a check for $500,000, and a burning determination that would fuel me for the next 12 years. They thought they'd purchased my disappearance, bought my silence, erased me from their world like a typo in a contract. They thought wrong. As the elevator descended from the 40th floor, each number counting down like a timer on my old life, I made myself a promise. I would take their money, yes. I would disappear, yes. I would honor the legal agreement to never contact them, absolutely. But I would also become something they never expected, never planned for, never thought possible from a small-town veterinarian who used to spend his Saturdays neutering cats and treating ear infections in golden retrievers. The elevator doors opened to the lobby, all glass and chrome and modern art that cost more than most people's houses. The security guard, a man named Jerome who'd always been kind to me during my few visits here, gave me a sympathetic nod. "Sorry to see you go, Dr. Holbrook," he said quietly. "You were the only one who ever asked about my dog's arthritis." "Keep giving him those supplements I recommended, Jerome," I said, shaking his hand. "Half a tablet twice a day with food." That was the difference between the Ashfords and me. They saw everyone as either useful or disposable, assets or liabilities worthy or worthless. I saw people, real people with real problems and real pets who needed real care. It was a difference that would matter more than any of us knew that day. The October rain was starting as I walked to my 10-year-old Honda Civic, the car Cordelia once refused to be seen in, claiming it would damage her reputation if anyone from the club saw her in such a vehicle. The rain felt appropriate, like the sky was washing away the last traces of Dean Holbrook, the veterinarian, the husband, the son-in-law who tried so hard to fit into a world that never wanted him. By the time I started the engine, I wasn't thinking about what I'd lost anymore. I was thinking about what I could build. The Ashfords had just given me $500,000 in a master class in ruthless business. They had no idea they'd just funded their own eventual downfall. 12 years, I thought, as I drove away from the towering glass monument to Ashford, wealth, and power. Give me 12 years, and everything will be different. They'd created their own worst enemy today, and they'd done it with a check and a smile, thinking they were so clever, so powerful, so untouchable. The rain intensified as I drove toward my clinic one last time, the windshield wipers beating a rhythm that sounded like a countdown to something the Ashfords couldn't imagine, something that would make Roland's dismissive laugh stick in his throat, something that would make Cordelia's sneer falter, something that would make Vivian understand exactly what she'd thrown away for the security of family money and the approval of parents who saw love as a weakness and marriage as a merger. The check in my pocket wasn't an ending. It was venture capital for a future they'd never see coming. Back in 2012, I was Dean Holbrook, a 28-year-old veterinarian running a modest animal clinic in Riverside, Ohio, a town where everyone knew everyone, and Friday night football games were the biggest events of the year. My hands were meant for healing sick dogs and cats, not handling corporate contracts or country club memberships. I'd inherited the clinic from my mentor, Dr. Eugene Hartley, who taught me that veterinary medicine was about compassion, not profit margins. The clinic wasn't much to look at. A converted 2-story house with peeling blue paint and a sign that creaked in the wind. But it was mine, and I was proud of it. My daily routine was simple and satisfying. Mornings started with surgery, usually spays and neuters, sometimes removing tumors or fixing broken bones. Afternoons were for appointments, vaccines, ear infections, anxious first-time puppy owners asking if every little sneeze meant their dog was dying. I made maybe $65,000 a year, which was plenty for a single guy in Riverside. I lived in a small apartment above the clinic, drove a reliable Honda Civic, and spent my weekends volunteering at the local animal shelter. It was a good life, an honest life, the kind of life my mother Grace had raised me to appreciate. I met Vivian at a charity auction for the Columbus Art Museum in September 2009. My veterinary school friend, Dr. James Whitmore, had given me his ticket because his wife was 8 months pregnant and couldn't attend. Free food, open bar, and rich people spending stupid money on art, he'd said. Consider it entertainment. I wore my only suit, a navy blue number from JCPenney that I'd bought for graduation, and felt like a kid playing dress-up among the tuxedos and designer gowns. The auction was held at the Brennan Estate, 30 acres of manicured perfection, that made me nervous just walking across the marble floors. I stationed myself near the back, nursing a beer and watching people casually bid more than my annual salary on paintings I didn't understand. That's when the auctioneer announced lot number 37, a bronze sculpture of a horse that looked like it had been partially melted. The auctioneer's British accent made everything sound expensive, and when he said, "We'll start the bidding at $500, I raised my hand, thinking it was $500. I liked horses, had treated plenty of them during my rural rotation in vet school. $50,000 from the gentleman in the back, the auctioneer announced, and my blood turned to ice water. Before I could correct the mistake, a voice beside me said, $55,000. I turned to see the most beautiful woman I'd ever encountered in real life. Vivian Ashford had honey blonde hair that caught the chandelier light, green eyes that seemed amused by my obvious panic, and a black dress. That probably cost more than my car. "Don't worry," she whispered, sliding into the empty chair next to mine. "I'll outbid you and save you from bankruptcy. You clearly didn't mean to bid $50,000 on that monstrosity." "How did you know?" I managed to ask. "Because you just turned the color of fresh mozzarella, and you're sweating through your department store suit," she said, raising her paddle again. $60,000. Someone else bid $70, and Vivian let them have it. She turned to me with a smile that made me forget about my near financial disaster. "Vivian Ashford," she said, extending a perfectly manicured hand. "Dean Holbrook," I replied, shaking it, and noting how soft her skin was compared to my calloused fingers. "I'm a veterinarian." "A veterinarian who almost bought a $50,000 sculpture," she laughed. "That's a story worth hearing. Come on, let's get you a real drink. You look like you need something stronger than that beer." We spent the rest of the evening talking at the bar while the auction continued behind us. Vivian was finishing her master's degree in art history at Ohio State, which explained her presence at the auction. Her family, she mentioned casually, was in manufacturing. What she didn't mention was that Ashford Industries was one of the largest manufacturing conglomerates in the Midwest, with factories in 6 states and annual revenues approaching $2 billion. "So, you save animals for a living," she said, genuinely interested. "That must be rewarding." "It has its moments," I said. "Yesterday I removed a sock from a golden retriever's intestines. The day before, I helped deliver 8 puppies. It's different every day. My life is conferences, galas, and discussing the cultural significance of abstract expressionism with people who buy art as tax write-offs, she said, and for the first time I heard sadness in her voice. You actually help living creatures. That's real. We talked until the auction ended and the estate staff started stacking chairs. When she asked for my number, I wrote it on a cocktail napkin, certain I'd never hear from her again. Rich, beautiful women didn't date veterinarians from Riverside. But she called the next day, and the next. Our first official date was at my clinic after hours because I had an emergency surgery. A dog hit by a car. Instead of being annoyed, Vivian put on surgical scrubs and held the IV bag while I operated. This is incredible, she said, watching me suture the dog's lacerations. You're literally saving this dog's life. It's just what I do, I said, but her admiration made me feel like a superhero. We dated for a year before I met her parents. If I'd known then what I know now, I would have run the moment Vivian mentioned Sunday dinner at the Ashford estate. But I was in love, completely and stupidly in love with a woman who looked at me like I was something special, who laughed at my dumb jokes about feline diabetes, who brought me lunch when I was too busy to eat. The Ashford estate made the Brennan place look modest. A gated entrance led to a private drive that wound through the landscaped gardens before revealing a mansion that belonged in a magazine. Roland Ashford met us at the door, his handshake firm enough to establish dominance, his smile never reaching his eyes. So, you're the veterinarian, he said, making my profession sound like a quaint hobby. Yes, sir, I run a clinic in Riverside. How nice, Cordelia said, appearing behind him in a dress that probably cost more than my monthly revenue. I suppose someone has to take care of the animals. Dinner was the interrogation disguised as conversation. What were my financial goals? Did I have investment portfolios? What was my 5-year business plan? Had I considered franchise opportunities? They picked apart my life with surgical precision, finding every flaw, every limitation, every reason I wasn't good enough for their daughter. Dean doesn't care about money, Vivian said, trying to defend me. He cares about helping animals and their families. How noble, Cordelia responded, cutting her filet mignon with deliberate precision. But caring doesn't pay for private schools or maintain proper social standing. Roland was more direct during his after-dinner brandy when Cordelia took Vivian to see some new art acquisition. You seem like a decent man, Dean, but you must understand that Vivian was raised with certain expectations. Her trust fund alone generates more annually than you'll make in a decade. How do you expect to provide for her? I don't need to provide her lifestyle, I said. I need to provide love, support, and partnership. He actually laughed. Love doesn't maintain a marriage, son. Security does. Stability does. Shared values and compatible backgrounds do. You're a nice diversion for Vivian, but when she's ready for reality, she'll come home to her own kind. I should have listened to that warning. Roland Ashford had just told me exactly how this would end, but I was too in love, too optimistic, too convinced that Vivian and I were different, special, strong enough to bridge the gap between our worlds. When she said yes to my proposal 6 months later, with a ring I'd saved for months to afford, a modest 1-carat diamond that she loved despite her parents' horror, I thought we'd proved everyone wrong. Our wedding in 2011 was the beginning of the end, though I didn't see it then. My side of the church had 20 people. My widowed mother Grace, who wore her best dress from Macy's, my younger brother Tommy, who worked at Riverside Hardware and served as my best man, my Uncle Carl and Aunt Dorothy, who ran a dairy farm an hour outside town, and a handful of friends from veterinary school who'd driven in from various corners of Ohio. Vivian's side looked like a Fortune 500 shareholders meeting, with guests who arrived in vehicles worth more than houses in my neighborhood. Roland walked Vivian down the aisle like he was surrendering territory to an enemy nation, his jaw clenched, his steps measured and reluctant. When the minister asked who gave this woman to be married, Roland's "her mother and I" sounded more like a declaration of war than a blessing. "You know what you've married into?" Tommy asked me at the reception, watching Roland's business partners cluster around him like wolves protecting their pack leader. "Dean, these people eat guys like us for breakfast." "Love conquers all," I told him, foolishly believing it, not knowing that in the Ashford world, love was just another asset to be managed, controlled, and when necessary, liquidated. Everything changed when Vivian's cousin, Sterling Ashford, returned from Harvard Business School in March 2012. Sterling was everything I wasn't. 6 feet 2 inches of polished confidence, with perfectly styled brown hair, a wardrobe full of custom suits, and the kind of ease around wealth that only comes from being born into it. He joined the family business as Executive Vice President of Strategic Development, a title Roland created specifically for him, and suddenly he was at every family gathering, every dinner, every charity event, sitting next to Vivian and sharing inside jokes from their childhood. Sterling and Vivian used to be inseparable as children, Cordelia informed me at Easter brunch, watching them laugh together on the terrace. They went to Swiss boarding school together, you know. Same social circle, same references, same understanding of how our world works. The way she said "our world" made it clear I would never be part of it, no matter how many uncomfortable dinners I attended or how many times I tried to discuss market trends I'd hastily researched on Google. Sterling had a way of making me feel small without ever being overtly rude. He'd ask about the clinic with exaggerated interest, like he was humoring a child talking about their lemonade stand. "That's so interesting, Dean," he'd say when I mentioned a successful surgery. "You actually get your hands dirty every day. How quaint." Then he'd turn to Vivian and launch into a story about closing a $10 million deal or having drinks with someone whose last name was on a building at Harvard. Vivian began to change, so gradually I almost didn't notice at first. She stopped visiting the clinic, claiming the smell of antiseptic gave her headaches. She enrolled in a series of society committees that met during my work hours, always with Sterling as her co-chair. When I'd come home exhausted from a 12-hour day of surgeries, she'd be on the phone with him, discussing fundraiser details or gallery openings, quickly ending the call when I walked in. "You're paranoid," she said when I mentioned how much time they spent together. "Sterling is family. He's helping me find my place in the business. Daddy wants me to take a more active role in Ashford Industries." "Since when do you care? About the business?" I asked. "You said you hated all that corporate stuff." "People change, Dean. I can't be a student forever. I need to contribute to my family's legacy." The real conflict began in July when I came home early from the clinic because my afternoon appointments had canceled. I found Vivian in our living room with Sterling, looking at architectural plans spread across our coffee table. They were sitting too close, her hand on his arm, both of them jumping apart when I walked in. "Dean," Vivian said, her voice too bright. "You're home early. Sterling was just showing me the plans for the new Ashford Industries headquarters." "In our living room?" I asked. "On a Saturday?" Sterling stood, smoothing his polo shirt, not a hair out of place despite the supposed casual nature of the visit. "I should go. We can finish this at the office, Vivian." After he left, Vivian and I had our first real fight. "Nothing happened," she insisted. "God, Dean, not every man who talks to me wants to sleep with me." "Sterling does," I said flatly. "Everyone can see it except you. Or maybe you can see it and you don't mind." She threw a glass at the wall, something I'd never seen her do. "Maybe I like having someone around who understands my world. Someone who doesn't look confused when we discuss trust funds or international markets. Someone who belongs at the events I attend instead of standing in the corner looking uncomfortable." "I'm trying," I said. "I go to your events. I wear the clothes you buy me. I pretend to care about stock portfolios." "That's the problem," she said coldly. "You're pretending. Sterling doesn't have to pretend. He just belongs." In August, I made a discovery that changed everything. Vivian had been acting strange all week, emotional and distant by turns. She was nauseous in the mornings but refused to see a doctor. When I found the pregnancy test hidden in the bathroom trash, wrapped in tissue paper like she was trying to conceal it, my heart nearly exploded with joy. We were going to have a baby. Despite all our problems, this would bring us together, make us a real family. I spent the whole day planning how to tell her I knew, how we'd convert the spare room into a nursery, how perfect this timing was. I even stopped at a baby store on the way home and bought a tiny pair of yellow booties. But when I got home, Vivian was crying on the couch, her phone in her hand. "I'm pregnant," she said without preamble. "I know," I said, sitting beside her and pulling out the booties. "And I'm so happy, Vivian. This is exactly what we need. A fresh start, a real family." She looked at the booties like they were poisonous. "I told my parents. They want me to terminate." "What? They can't make that decision for you, for us. They'll cut me off, Dean. No trust fund, no inheritance, nothing. They say a baby will ruin my future, tie me to a life I'm not meant for." "A life with me, you mean?" I said. The truth, finally. Clear. She didn't deny it. "Sterling has offered to marry me if I end the pregnancy and divorce you. The family approves. They'll make sure I'm taken care of, that I maintain my position." "Sterling?" I stood up, the room spinning. "Your cousin wants to marry you." "Second cousin," she corrected, as if that made it better. "It's not illegal or even that unusual in our circle, keeping wealth in the family." "And you're considering this?" I asked, though her face already gave me the answer. "I don't know how to be poor, Dean. I don't know how to raise a child on a veterinarian's salary. I don't know how to shop at regular stores or clip coupons or worry about mortgage payments. You'd rather kill our baby than learn?" The words came out harsher than I intended, but I didn't take them back. "It's not a baby yet," she said quietly. "It's just a cluster of cells. It's our child, Vivian, our future." She stood up, walking to the window that overlooked our modest backyard, so different from the manicured gardens of her childhood home. "I've already made the appointment. It's tomorrow morning. Sterling will drive me." "Sterling?" I grabbed her shoulder, turning her to face me. "You're letting Sterling drive you to terminate our pregnancy. He understands what's at stake. He understands the family dynamics. He understands me. And I don't? No, Dean, you don't. You think love is enough, but it's not. Love doesn't pay for private schools or European vacations or charity galas where everyone judges you by your bank account. I was playing at being middle class with you, but the game is over. I need to go home to my real life." I spent that night on the couch staring at the ceiling, holding those tiny yellow booties. By morning, Vivian was gone, a note on the kitchen table saying she'd be at her parents' house after the appointment. The next afternoon, Roland called and summoned me to his office. The meeting that would end my marriage wasn't about the divorce itself. That was already decided. It was about the terms of my surrender. Roland had everything prepared, the story they'd tell their friends, the financial settlement that would buy my silence and cooperation, the legal documents that would erase me from Vivian's life as efficiently as she'd erased our child from existence. "Vivian had a procedure yesterday," Roland said without preamble when I walked into his office. "The pregnancy is terminated. Now, let's discuss your exit from our family." The words hit me like physical blows. It was done. While I'd been sitting on our couch, imagining nursery colors and first steps and bedtime stories, Vivian had been in a clinic somewhere, ending that future with Sterling by her side instead of me. "She's my wife," I said, my voice breaking. "Was," Cordelia corrected, entering the room with a folder. "The papers are drawn up. Sterling has already moved into the guest house. They'll announce their engagement after a suitable period, once. Your divorce is final, much cleaner this way." "You planned all of this," I said, the full manipulation finally clear. "Sterling coming back, the time they spent together turning her against me. You orchestrated everything." Roland smiled, the first genuine expression I'd ever seen from him. "Welcome to business, Dean. Sometimes you have to remove obstacles to achieve optimal outcomes. You were an obstacle." Now, let's discuss your compensation for stepping aside gracefully. That's when he pushed the check across the desk. $500,000 to disappear, to forget I'd ever loved his daughter, to pretend our child had never existed, even for those few weeks. It was blood money, payment for a life destroyed and a future erased. But it was also something else, seed money for a revenge they'd never see coming. I signed the papers, not because of the money or the threats, but because Vivian had already chosen. The woman I loved had terminated our child and replaced me without even a conversation, without giving me a chance to fight for us. The $500,000 felt like blood money, but I took it anyway, folding the check into my wallet with hands that had stopped shaking, replaced by a cold determination I'd never felt before. I closed my clinic within a week, telling my clients I was taking a sabbatical for personal reasons. Mrs. Henderson cried when I told her I wouldn't be there for her diabetic cat's monthly checkups. "You're the only vet Whiskers trusts," she said, and I had to turn away to hide my own tears. I referred all my patients to Dr. Patricia Summers across town, packed my few belongings into a U-Haul, and said goodbye to Riverside without telling anyone where I was going. "You're running away," my mother Grace said when I stopped by her house on my way out of town. She was making her famous pot roast, the smell filling her modest kitchen with memories of every Sunday dinner we'd shared before Vivian. "I'm starting over," I corrected, hugging her tightly. "Sometimes you have to burn everything down to build something better." "That Ashford girl broke your heart," she said, not a question but a statement. "I never trusted those people. Too much money makes folks forget what matters." "They taught me what matters, Mom. Power, control, never being vulnerable again." She pulled back to look at me, concern creasing her face. "Don't let them change who you are, Dean. You're a good man. That's worth more than all their money." But I was already changing. The drive to Dallas took 18 hours, and with every mile, I shed another piece of the old Dean Holbrook. The veterinarian who believed in love conquering all died somewhere on Interstate 35. What arrived in Texas was someone else entirely. Someone with $500,000 and a burning need to prove Roland Ashford wrong about forgotten men staying forgotten. I rented a cheap apartment in an industrial area of Dallas, far from the glossy high-rises and manicured suburbs. My first month was spent researching, not veterinary medicine, but business opportunities. I read every book on entrepreneurship, studied market trends, analyzed the veterinary pharmaceutical industry with the obsession of someone who had nothing left to lose. That's when I found it. A patent for sale from Medivet Solutions, a defunct company that had gone bankrupt trying to develop a revolutionary heartworm treatment. The science was sound, but the original company had run out of money during the testing phase. They were selling the patent for $300,000, desperate to recoup something from their investors. I spent 3 days studying their research, understanding why they'd failed. It wasn't the product, it was the execution. They'd tried to do everything themselves instead of partnering with someone who understood both the science and the market. I called Dr. Felix Navarro, a brilliant chemist I'd met at a veterinary conference 2 years earlier. Felix had worked for major pharmaceutical companies but had recently been laid off during corporate restructuring. He was brilliant but difficult, the kind of perfectionist who annoyed management but produced incredible results. "I have a proposition," I told him over coffee at a dingy diner near his apartment. "I'm buying a patent for a heartworm treatment that could revolutionize veterinary medicine. I need someone who can perfect the formula and help me bring it to market." "With what money?" Felix asked, skeptical. "Last I heard you were running a small clinic in Ohio." "I have $500,000 in capital," I said. $300 for the patent, $100 for initial development, and the rest for living expenses while we work. I'm offering you a 40% stake in the company." Felix nearly choked on his coffee. 40%? Most investors would offer 5, maybe 10. "I'm not most investors. I need a partner, not an employee," someone as hungry as I am to prove everyone wrong. He studied me for a long moment. What happened to you, Dean? You used to be different, softer. Soft doesn't survive in the real world, I said. Are you in or not? He extended his hand. I'm in, but if we're doing this, we're doing it right. No shortcuts, no compromising on quality. We make something that actually works, that actually helps animals. That's the only way I know how to do it, I said, shaking his hand. We worked 18-hour days in a converted warehouse I'd rented for $1,000 a month. The space was sweltering in summer, freezing in winter, but it had good ventilation for the chemistry work and enough room for our testing equipment. Felix handled the formula refinement while I managed the business side, learning as I went, making mistakes but never the same one twice. Why are you pushing so hard? Felix asked one night as we ran our 100th trial. What are you trying to prove? I thought about telling him about Vivian, about the Ashfords, about the baby that never got to be. Instead, I said, someone once told me that men like me are forgotten the moment we leave the room. I'm going to make sure that's not true. The breakthrough came 8 months later. Felix had been working on a delivery mechanism that would allow the treatment to not only prevent heartworm, but actually reverse early-stage infections. Traditional treatments were harsh, requiring months of painful injections and strict rest. Ours was a simple monthly pill that worked with the dog's immune system instead of against it. This is it, Felix said, looking at the test results. This actually works. We did it, Dean. But creating the product was only the beginning. Now we needed FDA approval, manufacturing partners, and distribution channels. I spent $50,000 of my remaining money on a patent lawyer who helped us file everything correctly. Then I did something the old Dean would never have done. I leveraged Roland Ashford's lesson about power and connections. I cold called Dr. Mitchell Brennan, the head of veterinary medicine at Texas A&M, and pitched him our product. Give me 30 minutes, I said. If you're not impressed, I'll never contact you again. He gave me an hour and ended up connecting me with 3 major veterinary pharmaceutical distributors. This could change everything, he said. Every vet in America will want this. Within 18 months, VetGuard Pharmaceuticals had its first product on the market. We started with Texas, then expanded to neighboring states. By year 3, we were national. The money started flowing, first thousands, then millions. I reinvested everything, developing new products, hiring the best researchers, building a company that would make the Ashfords' manufacturing empire look like a mom-and-pop shop. You should celebrate, Felix said when we hit our first $10 million in revenue. Buy a nice car, take a vacation, do something fun. Not yet, I said, looking at our projections. We're just getting started. My brother Tommy visited during year 4, when VetGuard had moved into a proper corporate headquarters. This is insane, Dean, he said, looking around the gleaming laboratories and offices. You built all this? The Ashfords built this, I said quietly. They just don't know it yet. You're still thinking about them? After all this time? Every single day, I admitted. Not with pain anymore, with purpose. They thought they were destroying me, but they were actually creating me. The Dean, who loved Vivian, who believed in happily ever after, who thought being a good person was enough, that Dean is dead. This Dean understands how the world really works. Tommy looked concerned. And what happens when you've proved whatever you're trying to prove? I didn't have an answer for that. All I knew was that I wasn't done yet, not even close. The veterinarian from Riverside was gone, replaced by someone Roland Ashford would have respected if he'd bothered to look closer, someone who understood that in business, as in life, the best revenge wasn't just success. It was becoming the very thing your enemies never thought you could be, then surpassing even that. In late 2024, my investment team brought me an interesting opportunity during our Monday morning meeting. Patricia Huang, my CFO, who I'd recruited from Goldman Sachs 5 years earlier, pulled up a presentation on the conference room screen. "There's a manufacturing company in Ohio on the verge of bankruptcy," she said, clicking through financial statements that showed a steady decline over the past decade. Ashford Industries, they're hemorrhaging money, lost 3 major contracts this year, and their primary lender is about to call in their loans. They're desperate for a buyer. I leaned back in my chair, keeping my expression neutral while my pulse quickened. "Tell me more about their situation." "Classic case of failure to modernize," Patricia continued. "The current CEO, Roland Ashford, refused to invest in automation. They're still using manufacturing processes from the 1990s, while their competitors have moved to AI-driven systems. His son-in-law, Sterling Ashford, made several disastrous investments trying to expand into markets they didn't understand. They lost $40 million on a failed venture in China alone." "Son-in-law?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Sterling Ashford married the owner's daughter, Vivian, about 11 years ago. He was supposed to be the heir apparent, but he's driven the company further into the ground. The board is in full revolt. They need a buyer within 60 days or they'll have to declare Chapter 11. I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the Dallas skyline. 12 years of building, planning, and waiting had led to this moment. "Set up a meeting, but don't tell them who the buyer is until I walk into the room." "Dean," Patricia said carefully. She'd been with me long enough to sense when something was personal. "Is there something I should know about this acquisition?" "Just that it's going to be the most satisfying deal of my career," I said. "Make it happen." The meeting was scheduled for October 15, 2024, at Ashford Industries headquarters, the same building where I'd signed my life away 12 years earlier. I flew to Ohio on my private Gulfstream, accompanied by my full legal team. During the flight, I reviewed the forensic accounting report my team had compiled. Ashford Industries was worse than bankrupt. They were buried in debt, lawsuits, and failed obligations. Roland's pride had destroyed his empire piece by piece. The building looked the same from the outside, all glass and chrome reaching toward the sky, but inside, the decay was evident. The marble lobby that once gleamed was dull and cracked. The modern art had been sold, leaving pale shadows on the walls where frames once hung. Even the security desk was reduced to 1 guard instead of the 3 who used to patrol the entrance. Jerome, the same security guard from 12 years ago, was still there, though his hair had gone completely gray. His eyes widened when he saw me. "Dr. Holbrook, is that you? It's good to see you, Jerome," I said, shaking his hand. "How's your dog?" "Passed 5 years ago," he said sadly. "But those supplements you recommended gave him 2 extra good years. I never forgot that kindness." "I'm sorry for your loss," I said, meaning it. Then I handed him my business card, Dean Holbrook, CEO, VetGuard Pharmaceuticals. "When this is all over, come see me. I could use someone trustworthy running security at my Dallas headquarters." The elevator ride to the 40th floor felt like traveling through time. My legal team was silent, sensing the weight of the moment. When the doors opened, Harrison Blackwood, the same lawyer who'd handled my divorce, was waiting. He looked older, grayer, his expensive suit unable to hide the stress radiating from him. "Mr. Holbrook," he said, his voice strained. "The board is assembled in the main conference room." The conference room was packed with Ashford board members, their faces gaunt with desperation. Roland sat at the head of the table, but he was a shadow of the man who'd dismissed me 12 years ago. His hair was white, his face deeply lined, his hands trembling slightly as they rested on the table. Cordelia was beside him, her designer dress unable to hide her hollow cheeks and the dark circles under her eyes that no amount of concealer could cover. Sterling was there too, his Harvard confidence replaced with visible panic, sweat beading on his forehead despite the air conditioning. And Vivian. Still beautiful but worn down, her honey blonde hair now showing premature gray at the roots, her green eyes carrying a sadness that expensive makeup couldn't conceal. She wore a wedding ring, a massive diamond that Sterling must have bought to prove he was better than the modest ring I'd once given her. "Ladies and gentlemen," Patricia announced, standing at the head of the room, "I present Dean Holbrook, CEO of VetGuard Pharmaceuticals and your potential buyer." The silence was deafening. Roland's face went from white to red to purple, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. Sterling's mouth hung open, his eyes darting between me and the door as if calculating escape routes. Cordelia gripped the table edge so hard her knuckles went white, but it was Vivian who broke. She stood up, her chair scraping against the floor with a sound like nails on glass, and screamed, "The broke husband is now the billionaire buying us? This can't be happening. Dean, you signed papers. You agreed to stay away." "I agreed to stay away from your family," I said calmly, taking my seat at the opposite end of the table from Roland. "This is business. Your father taught me that everything has a price. Apparently, so does Ashford Industries." Roland found his voice, though it came out as a rasp. "You can't do this. We won't sell. To you." "You will," I said, sliding a folder across the table. My legal team distributed copies to each board member. "Because I'm offering $100 million for a company worth maybe $30 million in its current state. It's more than generous. Your other option is bankruptcy within 3 months. My forensic accountants have reviewed your financials. You're behind on loan payments, facing 6 lawsuits from suppliers, and your biggest client just terminated their contract." "You've been watching us," Sterling said, his voice cracking. "You've been planning this." "I've been building my company," I corrected. "The fact that yours was falling apart at the perfect moment is just fortunate timing. Though I must say, Sterling, your expansion into China was particularly poorly executed. Did you really think you could compete in markets you didn't understand with technology 2 decades out of date?" "Why?" Vivian asked, tears streaming down her face, her carefully applied mascara running in black rivers. "Why would you save us after what we did?" "I'm not saving you," I said, making eye contact with each of them in turn. "I'm buying a company with good bones and infrastructure that fits my expansion plans. The fact that it's yours is irrelevant, although I do have one condition." Roland leaned forward, his pride finally broken. "What condition?" "Sterling Ashford is terminated immediately. I won't have incompetence in my organization." I looked at Sterling, who seemed to shrink in his chair. "You cost this company everything with your arrogance, the same arrogance that made you think you could replace me. How did that work out for you?" "You can't demand that," Sterling protested, though his voice lacked conviction. "I'm family. I'm married to Vivian. Actually," Vivian said quietly, "we're separated. Have been for 6 months. The divorce papers are being drawn up." This was news even to me. I kept my expression neutral, but inside, I felt a grim satisfaction. Their perfect arrangement, the cousin marriage that had been meant to keep the wealth in the family, had failed just like everything else they'd built on lies and manipulation. Cordelia spoke for the first time, her voice bitter. "You've become just like us, cold, calculating. Roland would be proud if you weren't destroying us." "No, Cordelia. I became better than you. I built something instead of inheriting it. I earned my billions instead of marrying into them. And I never had to destroy a family or kill an unborn child to protect my wealth." The words hung in the air like a blade. Vivian sobbed openly. Roland's hand shook as he reached for the pen. "There's something else," I said as Roland prepared to sign. "The veterinary clinic in Riverside, the one I used to run, I bought the building last year. I'm turning it into a free clinic for families who can't afford pet care. It'll be called the Grace Holbrook Memorial Clinic, after my mother. She passed 5 years ago, but she always said the best revenge is living well and giving back." "Your mother was a saint," Vivian whispered. "She was always kind to me, even when she knew I didn't deserve it." "She was," I agreed. "She taught me that helping others matters more than destroying enemies." That's why I'm offering you a fair price for a failing company. It's more grace than you showed me." Roland signed the papers, his signature shaky but legal. One by one, the board members signed, each signature another nail in the coffin of the Ashford dynasty. When it was done, when Ashford Industries officially belonged to me, I stood to leave. "Dean, wait," Vivian called out. "The baby, our baby. I think about that decision every day. Sterling and I never had children. The doctors said the procedure caused complications. It was my punishment." I paused at the door, not turning around. "We all make choices, Vivian. You chose wealth over love. I chose to rebuild instead of revenge. The difference is my choice led somewhere better." Walking out of that building, I thought about the veterinarian I used to be, heartbroken and humiliated, clutching a check for $500,000 like it was a fortune. That money had been meant to buy my silence and submission. Instead, it bought my freedom and future. The October wind hit my face as I stepped onto the sidewalk, the same wind that had been blowing 12 years ago when I'd left this building as a nobody. Now, I was leaving as the owner. My brother Tommy, now vice president of my charitable foundation, called as I got into my car. "How did it go?" "I bought the company," I said, settling into the leather seats of my Bentley, a car I'd bought not for status but because I'd earned it. "And how do you feel?" I thought about it, really considered the question. Empty, actually. All these years, I thought this moment would feel like victory, but it just feels like closing a chapter I should have closed long ago. "Maybe that's the real victory," Tommy said, moving on completely. "By the way, the memorial clinic is ready for the grand opening next week. We've already got 300 families signed up for free services." "Mom would have loved that," I said, feeling the first genuine smile cross my face all day. "She would have been proud of you, Dean. Not for the money or the company, but for remembering what matters." 6 months later, I stood at the grand opening of the Grace Holbrook Memorial Clinic. Hundreds of families had come with their pets, a line stretching around the block. The building had been completely renovated, equipped with state-of-the-art surgical suites, diagnostic equipment that rivaled any big city animal hospital, and a staff of veterinarians who shared my mother's belief that every animal deserved care regardless of their owner's ability to pay. A little girl, maybe 7 years old, tugged on my suit jacket. She was holding a small terrier mix with a bandaged paw. "Mister, are you the one who made it, so Patches could get his surgery for free?" I knelt down to her level. "What happened to Patches?" "He got hit by a car, and Mommy said we couldn't afford to fix him. But then this place called and said we could bring him here." She hugged the dog tighter. "You saved him." Her mother, a tired-looking woman in a waitress uniform, touched my shoulder. "Thank you. I worked 2 jobs but still couldn't afford the $1,000 for surgery. You gave me back my daughter's best friend." That smile, that gratitude, was worth more than any business deal. This was what my mother had understood, what the Ashfords never could. True wealth wasn't measured in stock portfolios or trust funds, but in the lives you touched, the differences you made, the love you put into the world. Roland Ashford died a year later. The official cause was a heart attack, but I knew better. It was shame and defeat that killed him, watching his empire dissolved and divided among creditors. Cordelia moved to a modest apartment in Florida, her society friends abandoning her the moment the money ran out. She lived on Social Security and a small pension Roland had protected in an insurance policy, a far cry from the luxury she'd known. Sterling works as a middle manager at a logistics company in Michigan, his Harvard MBA worthless without the Ashford name to open doors. I heard through industry contacts that he'd applied for a job at one of my subsidiary companies. The hiring manager asked my opinion. "Judge him on his merits," I said. "If he's qualified, hire him. If not, pass." They passed. Vivian remarried 2 years after our encounter in the boardroom. She married another veterinarian, ironically, someone she met while volunteering at an animal shelter. Dr. Michael Torres was everything I used to be: kind, dedicated, middle class, and completely devoted to helping animals. She sent me a letter after the wedding. "Dean, I know I have no right to contact you, but I needed you to know that I finally understand what I lost. Michael reminds me of you, the you from before everything went wrong. He doesn't have money, but he has something more valuable: integrity and the ability to love without conditions. I threw away a fortune of a different kind when I chose my family over you. I see now that the real wealth was in the life we could have built together, the child we could have raised, the love we could have shared. Your success doesn't surprise me. You always had something special. I was just too blind and selfish to value it. I hope you found happiness. You deserve it. Forever sorry, Vivian." I never responded. Some bridges, once burned, should stay ash, but I did something else. I had my assistant send an anonymous donation to the animal shelter where she volunteered, enough to fund their operations for 5 years. Not for Vivian, but for the animals, and for Dr. Torres, who deserved a chance to succeed where I had failed. The truth about revenge is that it's never as sweet as success. The Ashfords thought they were teaching me about power when they threw money at me to disappear. What they actually taught me was that real power isn't inherited or married into. Real power is built from nothing, sustained by purpose, and measured not in what you can take from others but in what you can give back. Today, VetGuard Pharmaceuticals is valued at $3.2 billion. We employ thousands of people, provide affordable veterinary medications worldwide, and fund free clinics in 30 states. The Grace Holbrook Foundation has provided over $10 million in free veterinary care to families in need. Every month, I receive hundreds of letters from pet owners whose animals are alive because of our programs. I keep one letter on my desk from a 10-year-old boy named Jason, whose golden retriever survived cancer thanks to our subsidized treatment program. He wrote in crayon, "Thank you for saving my dog. He's my best friend. You must be the richest man in the world." He's right, but not for the reasons he thinks. My mother was right all those years ago. The best revenge isn't destroying those who hurt you. It's becoming someone they could never have imagined you'd be, then forgetting they exist at all. Roland Ashford thought he was ending my story when he pushed that check across his desk. He was actually writing the first chapter of something he'd never lived to fully understand: that a good man, with nothing to lose and everything to prove, is the most dangerous opponent in any boardroom. The Ashfords are a cautionary tale now, whispered about in country clubs and business schools. The family that had everything and lost it all because they couldn't see value beyond a balance sheet. They traded their daughter's happiness for social standing and ended up with neither. They chose bloodlines over love and ended up with empty bloodlines and emptier hearts. As for me, I learned that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the best thing that ever happened for you. That rejection can be redirection, that a broken heart can become an unbreakable will, that $500,000 meant to silence you can become billions that speak louder than words. Every morning, I wake up in my Dallas penthouse, not thinking about the Ashfords or Vivian or the past. I think about the 70 employees counting on me, the thousands of animals our medications will help today, the families who will keep their pets because of our programs. That's my revenge, my success, my purpose. The broke veterinarian from Riverside, Ohio, didn't just become a billionaire. He became something more valuable. Proof that where you come from doesn't determine where you're going, that losing everything can be the beginning of having it all, that the best response to being underestimated is exceeding every estimation. Sometimes I drive past that old clinic in Riverside, now the Grace Holbrook Memorial, and watch families bringing in their pets. I see hope in eyes, relief in their faces, love in how they hold their animals. That's when I know my mother was right about everything. Success isn't about the money you make, but the difference you make with the money. Power isn't about crushing your enemies but lifting up those who need it most. The Ashfords gave me $500,000 to disappear. Instead, I became impossible to ignore. They wanted me to stay away from their wealth. Instead, I created wealth they could never imagine. They thought they were better than me. In the end, I became better than they ever knew how to be. Closing message to viewers. And that's where this story ends, but really, it's just the beginning. If you enjoyed this story of transformation, revenge served cold, and ultimate redemption, please hit that like button below. It really helps the channel grow and allows me to bring you more incredible stories like this one. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that their current struggles might be preparing them for their greatest comeback. Sometimes the worst chapter of your life becomes the prologue to your success story. Drop a comment below and let me know what you thought about Dean's journey. Have you ever had someone underestimate you, only to prove them completely wrong? I read every comment and love hearing your own stories of triumph over adversity. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss a story. Every week, I bring you tales of unexpected twists, life-changing moments, and the kind of satisfaction that comes from seeing good people win in the end. Remember, your value isn't determined by those who can't see your worth. Sometimes, the best thing that can happen is for the wrong people to exit your life, making room for the right opportunities to enter. Until next time, keep believing in your comeback story. It might just be worth billions.